My name is Isabella Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. 2 nights ago, my father stood up at our family's most exclusive gathering, 50 relatives, crystal champagne flutes, a ballroom that cost more than most people's annual salaries, and announced to everyone that I was being cut from my grandmother's inheritance. "You never deserved it," he declared, his voice echoing off marble walls while everyone turned to stare. I simply smiled, raised my glass in a mock toast, and walked out without a word. 48 hours later, my father lost everything, $15 million and control of his empire, all because of a secret my grandmother took to her grave. Or so he thought. Before I share how one woman's foresight destroyed my family's greed, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy this story. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me tell you how justice was served. The Mitchell family built their fortune in commercial real estate, starting with my grandfather's first apartment building in 1962 and growing into a $500 million empire by the time I was born. Our main estate sprawled across 30 rooms in Connecticut, complete with staff quarters, a temperature-controlled garage housing my father's collection of vintage Bentleys, and a wine cellar that held bottles worth more than my teacher's salary. Yes, I said teacher's salary. Despite being the eldest Mitchell heir, I chose to teach art at a public high school in Brooklyn. My father, Robert Mitchell, never forgave me for that decision. At every family gathering, he'd gesture toward my younger sister Victoria with his Patek Philippe-adorned wrist and announce, "Now here's a Mitchell who understands legacy." Victoria, 4 years my junior, had stepped seamlessly into her role as vice president of Mitchell Holdings at 25. She wore her title like her Hermès bags, conspicuously and without subtlety. The irony wasn't lost on me that in a family obsessed with building things, I was the only one who created anything with my own hands. My students' artwork covered my small apartment walls where original Warhols might have hung. My father called it playing with finger paints. My grandmother Eleanor, however, called it something else entirely. "True wealth, Isabella," she once told me during one of our weekly teas, her fingers tracing the rim of her Waterford crystal cup, "isn't measured in square footage or stock portfolios. Your grandfather knew that. Your father—" She'd pause, choosing her words carefully. "Forgot." What I didn't know then was that grandmother Eleanor hadn't just observed the family dynamics. She'd been documenting them. And more importantly, she'd been planning. Eleanor Hayes. Mitchell wasn't just my grandmother, she was the family's quiet foundation. Before marrying my grandfather, she'd served as one of Connecticut's youngest female judges, retiring from the bench only after Victoria was born. While my father built his empire on grandfather's foundation, Eleanor built something else. A personal estate worth $20 million through careful investments and the inheritance from her own family's pharmaceutical patents. Every Sunday for 15 years, I drove to her Westport home. Not the family estate, her private residence that she'd maintained separately throughout her marriage. Victoria visited on holidays. My father managed quarterly appearances, usually with contracts requiring her signature. But I came for her stories, her wisdom, and honestly, her company. "You're the only one who sees me, not my checkbook," she said one afternoon, 6 months before she died. We were sitting in her study, surrounded by law books and framed photos from her judge days. "That's why I need to tell you something." She pulled out a document from her desk drawer, its legal seal visible. "I've made certain arrangements, protections, really. This family has a disease, Isabella, the belief that money determines worth. I won't let that disease destroy you." I assumed she meant emotional support, maybe a modest trust fund to supplement my teaching salary. I didn't ask for details because I didn't care about her money. I cared about her. "Promise me," she said, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "When the time comes, you'll remember that every word in this will was chosen deliberately. Every clause has a purpose." 3 months later, she was gone. Heart failure in her sleep, peaceful and dignified. The funeral was elaborate, of course. My father gave a speech about legacy and empire. Victoria spoke about continuing the family tradition. I read Mary Oliver's When Death Comes and watched my father's jaw tighten with each verse. 3 months after grandmother's funeral, the family dynamics shifted with the subtlety of a hostile takeover. My father called emergency board meetings in the Mitchell Holdings conference room, a $50,000 mahogany table surrounded by leather chairs that cost more than my annual teaching salary. I wasn't invited naturally. Estate planning, Victoria explained during a rare moment alone at a family dinner. She adjusted her Cartier watch, a nervous tell she'd developed in business school. Dad's restructuring everything before the will reading. Grandmother's 20 million has to go somewhere, and he wants to ensure it strengthens the right positions. The right positions, I repeated, cutting into my duck confit, meaning yours and his. Meaning the people actually contributing to the family legacy. Her voice carried our father's practiced condescension. Isabella, you made your choice. You can't teach finger painting to teenagers and expect equal standing with those of us maintaining the empire. That night, I received an unexpected email from James Crawford, my grandmother's personal attorney. The subject line read simply, Confidential. EHM Estate. The message was brief. Ms. Mitchell, your grandmother requested I contact you privately before the formal reading. Please call my office at your earliest convenience. Some matters require discussion. I called the next morning from my classroom, watching my students work on their self-portraits. Ms. Mitchell, Crawford's voice was carefully neutral. I've been your grandmother's attorney for 30 years. In that time, I've never seen such careful planning. She anticipated certain scenarios, made provisions. I believe you should be aware of these provisions before the family gathering. What kind of provisions? The kind that activate under specific circumstances. Your grandmother was particularly concerned about what she called public demonstrations of character. I think we should meet before your father schedules the formal reading. The humiliations began subtly, then escalated like a calculated campaign. At the monthly family dinner in my father's private dining room, he orchestrated what I now recognize as a deliberate performance. The entire extended family was present. Aunts, uncles, cousins who worked for various Mitchell enterprises. Let's discuss contributions, my father announced over the Wellington beef. Victoria just closed the Harbison deal. 40 million in new development. Marcus, he nodded to my cousin, expanded our Boston portfolio by 15%. His gaze finally landed on me. And Isabella painted, what was it? Finger turkeys with the children? Self-portraits, actually. My students are exploring identity through. How much revenue did that generate for Mitchell Holdings? He didn't wait for an answer. This is why the inheritance structure needs to reflect actual value. Those who build the empire deserve to inherit it. Those who choose, he waved dismissively toward me, artistic hobbies shouldn't expect equal treatment. The room filled with uncomfortable chuckles and shifting silverware. I maintained eye contact while reaching for my phone beneath the table, activating the recording app. A habit I developed 3 months ago when these dinners became interrogations. I understand, Father, I said calmly. You're saying inheritance should reflect a person's value to the family business, not their value as family. Exactly. He seemed pleased I'd understood. Finally, some sense. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, cleared her throat. Robert, that seems rather harsh. Business is harsh, Patricia. Isabella chose to waste her potential. Why should she benefit from Victoria's hard work? From mine? I saved the recording to my cloud storage, labeling it Dinner 5, Value Discussion. It joined 12 others, a digital trail of my father's growing boldness. Each one more explicit than the last about his intentions for grandmother's estate. The revelation came by accident. I'd returned to the family estate to retrieve a painting I'd left in my old room, one of my grandmother's favorites. The house seemed empty, but as I passed my father's study, I heard Victoria's voice through the mahogany doors. The announcement needs to be public, she was saying. Maximum impact. If we do it privately, Isabella might contest. She won't contest anything after we're through. My father's voice carried a satisfaction that chilled me. The family gala next week. 50 guests, all our relatives and key business associates. We'll frame it as the official inheritance announcement. And you're certain the will allows for discretionary distribution? Crawford will read what needs to be read. The rest is interpretation. Once I publicly declare Isabella unfit for inheritance, lazy, unfocused, a disappointment to the Mitchell name, no one will question when her portion goes to you. Public shame is powerful, Victoria. She'll be too humiliated to fight back. What if she doesn't show up? Oh, she'll show. I'll make sure of it. Tell her it's about honoring Eleanor's memory. She won't be able to resist. I stood frozen in the hallway, my grandmother's painting clutched against my chest. They were planning a public execution of my character. That evening, Crawford's second email arrived. Ms. Mitchell, I've reviewed the timeline your grandmother anticipated. It appears certain events are being set in motion. She wanted me to inform you that public demonstrations of character work both ways. The attached video link requires a password. Use your grandmother's favorite poem title, no spaces, all lowercase. I typed, "When Death Comes," and watched my grandmother's face appear on screen, sitting in Crawford's office with 3 other witnesses visible in frame. If you're watching this, Isabella, then they've shown you exactly who they are. Crawford's office occupied the top floor of a Hartford building that predated Mitchell Holdings by decades. The morning I visited, 3 days before the gala, he had 2 other senior partners present as witnesses. Your grandmother recorded this video will 6 months ago, Crawford explained, gesturing to a wall-mounted screen. She insisted on multiple witnesses and notarization. What you're about to see is legally bulletproof. The video resumed with my grandmother adjusting her pearl necklace, the one she wore to court during her biggest cases. I, Eleanor Hayes Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, hereby establish the following moral character clause as an integral condition of inheritance. Any beneficiary who publicly humiliates, demeans, or attempts to disinherit another family member through social coercion forfeits all rights to my estate. This includes monetary assets, securities, and my 30% stake in Mitchell Holdings. She looked directly into the camera. This clause activates when witnessed by 20 or more individuals in a formal setting. The forfeited inheritance transfers immediately to the wronged party. Crawford paused the video. There's more. Detailed provisions, authentication procedures. Your grandmother spent 3 months perfecting this language with our estate law team. She also did something unusual. He handed me a folder. She investigated your father's financial position. He needs her 30% stake to maintain control of Mitchell Holdings. Without it, the board can vote him out. He doesn't know about this clause? Your grandmother insisted on standard language in the public will summary. The full conditions are only revealed after activation. She called it, allowing people to show their true character. I studied the documents, understanding dawning. So if he publicly humiliates me at the gala, he loses everything. But Isabella, you need 20 witnesses and documentation. I'll be there, but you'll need to ensure it's properly recorded. Don't worry, I said quietly. They're planning quite the show. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom gleamed with calculated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across 50 guests, each holding champagne flutes filled with Dom Perignon. My father had spared no expense for what he'd billed as a celebration of Eleanor Hayes Mitchell's legacy. I arrived in a simple black sheath dress, elegant but understated, nothing that screamed money. Victoria, in contrast, wore a custom Versace gown that photographers from the society pages were already capturing. She air-kissed relatives while my father worked the room in his Tom Ford tuxedo, laying groundwork for what was to come. Isabella, my Aunt Patricia embraced me warmly. I was worried you might not come. Grandmother would have wanted me here, I said, accepting a champagne flute from a passing server. The ballroom's layout was perfect for my father's purposes. A raised platform at the front with a microphone, theater-style seating for all guests, and cameras from the family's documentary filmmaker cousin who'd been hired to preserve the moment. I noted the security cameras in the corners, their red lights blinking steadily. Crawford stood near the back, briefcase in hand, appearing to be just another guest. We made brief eye contact. He tapped his phone, recording. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father's voice boomed through the speakers. He'd taken the platform, Victoria beside him. "Thank you for joining us to honor my mother's memory and discuss the future of her legacy." The room settled into expectant silence. 50 witnesses, I counted, plus security footage, plus Crawford, plus my own phone, recording from my clutch. "Before we begin," my father continued, his eyes finding me in the crowd, "there's something important that needs to be addressed. Something about family, responsibility, and who truly deserves to carry on the Mitchell name." Victoria smiled. Several relatives shifted uncomfortably. The trap was set. My father gripped the edges of the podium, his Wharton-class ring catching the light. Family legacy isn't just about blood. It's about contribution. It's about building upon what previous generations created. His voice carried the authority of countless board meetings. My mother Eleanor understood this, which is why her estate must go to those who honor that legacy. He paused for effect, and I saw several relatives lean forward. "Isabella," he said my name like an indictment. "Stand up." I rose slowly, keeping my expression neutral. The room's attention shifted to me like a spotlight. My eldest daughter chose to abandon the family business, while Victoria here, he gestured proudly, became our youngest VP. Isabella decided to teach finger painting to teenagers. The derision in his voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "She contributes nothing to Mitchell Holdings. She generates no revenue. She builds nothing." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I remained standing, silent. "Therefore," my father's voice rose to fill the ballroom, "it's been decided that Isabella will receive nothing from Eleanor's estate. Not $1. She made her choice to live a small, insignificant life. She never deserved the Mitchell inheritance, and she won't receive it." Victoria actually applauded. A few relatives joined uncertainly. Most sat in stunned silence. "This is what's best for the family," my father continued. "Those who waste their potential shouldn't benefit from those who achieve greatness. Isabella is officially disinherited from—" I raised my champagne glass, the gesture stopping him mid-sentence. "Thank you, Father," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent ballroom. "Thank you for making this so very public." I took a deliberate sip, set the glass on the nearest table with a crystalline ring, and walked toward the exit. 50 pairs of eyes tracked my movement. "Where are you going?" Victoria called out. I didn't answer. I simply left. If you've ever been judged by your family for choosing passion over profit, for picking purpose over portfolio, leave a comment below. Your story matters. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the moment when justice arrives in the most unexpected way. I didn't look back as I left the Ritz-Carlton, but I heard the chaos erupting behind me. Voices raised in confusion, my father demanding I return, Victoria's shrill laugh cutting through it all. My phone buzzed with messages before I reached my car. I ignored them all except one. "Crawford. Perfectly executed. Documentation secured. See you in 48 hours." The ballroom footage would later show what happened after my exit. My father, attempting to salvage his moment, continued his speech about family values and earning inheritance. Victoria took the microphone to thank him for his wisdom and strength. Several relatives left early, visibly uncomfortable. My Aunt Patricia was caught on camera shaking her head in disgust. But the most important witness was the Ritz-Carlton security system, which captured everything in high definition. The gathering of 53 people, my father's complete speech, his exact words, "Isabella is officially disinherited." The hotel's event coordinator, per standard procedure, had also recorded the special announcement for their archives. That night, my phone rang incessantly. I turned it off and spent the evening painting. A portrait of my grandmother in her judge's robes, gavel in hand, a slight smile on her lips, the same smile she wore when she'd won a particularly satisfying case. 48 hours. That's what Crawford had said. 48 hours for my father to bask in his perceived victory, for Victoria to start spending money she didn't yet have, for the family to process what they'd witnessed. I'd learned patience from teaching teenagers, but I'd learned strategy from Eleanor Hayes Mitchell. The next morning, my father left a voicemail. Your tantrum changes nothing. The lawyers are updating the distribution documents. Accept reality, Isabella. Reality. He had no idea what reality was about to become. The family group chat exploded within hours. I watched the messages accumulate without responding. Victoria. Can you believe her dramatic exit? So pathetic. Cousin Marcus. This feels wrong. Aunt Eleanor wouldn't have wanted this. Uncle Richard. Robert, was this really necessary? My father. The decision is final. Isabella made her choices. Aunt Patricia. This was cruel, Robert, shameful. My father. Business isn't about feelings, Patricia. What they didn't know was that Crawford had already begun the legal machinery. Forms filed with the probate court. Notices sent to Mitchell Holdings' board of directors. A formal reading scheduled for the next morning at his firm. Victoria called me 17 times. I didn't answer. She finally sent a text. Stop being a child. You knew this was coming. At least show some dignity. Dignity. They were about to learn about dignity. That evening, as I sat in my Brooklyn apartment grading student artwork, Crawford called with an update. Your father's assistant contacted me, he said, demanding to see the full will before tomorrow's reading. I told her that wouldn't be possible. Your grandmother's instructions were explicit. The complete document is only revealed during the formal reading. Is he worried? He's curious why you haven't fought back, why you haven't hired a lawyer or made threats. Your silence is making him nervous. Good. Let him wonder. Let him lose sleep puzzling over my calm exit, my raised glass, my final words to him. The security footage from the Ritz-Carlton had already been duplicated and notarized. 53 witness statements had been collected by Crawford's team, standard procedure for an estate reading. He'd told the guests who'd called to confirm their attendance. Tomorrow, my father would learn what my grandmother had taught me. True power isn't loud, it's patient, it's prepared, and it's absolutely devastating when deployed correctly. Crawford's appearance at the Ritz-Carlton hadn't gone unnoticed. The morning after the gala, my father's assistant had identified him from the security footage he'd demanded to review, looking, he claimed, for footage of my disrespectful behavior. Why was Eleanor's attorney there? My father confronted Crawford by phone while I listened on speaker in Crawford's office. I attend many social functions, Mr. Mitchell. Your mother was a respected figure in Hartford society. You were recording. Many people record memorable events. Your own cousin filmed the entire evening. I want to see the will, the complete document. That will happen at tomorrow's formal reading, as your mother specified, 2 p.m. sharp. I trust you and Victoria will attend? Of course we'll attend. It's our inheritance. Indeed, Crawford said mildly. It certainly involves inheritance. After the call, Crawford showed me the conference room where the reading would occur. Your grandmother chose this space specifically. Glass walls, completely transparent. She said justice should never hide in shadows. The mahogany table could seat 20. Crawford had already placed name cards for the mandatory attendees. Robert Mitchell, Victoria Mitchell, Isabella Mitchell, and 3 senior partners as witnesses. Your father requested a private reading, Crawford noted. I informed him that your grandmother's will specified an open session. Any family member who wishes to attend may do so. By that evening, word had spread. Aunt Patricia confirmed she'd be there. So would Uncle Richard, 3 cousins, and surprisingly, several board members from Mitchell Holdings who'd heard rumors about estate distributions affecting company ownership. My father sent one final text that night. Whatever you're planning won't work. The announcement was made. It's done. I finally responded with just 3 words. See you tomorrow. Let him interpret that however he wished. In less than 24 hours, he'd understand everything. The morning of the reading, an email arrived from Victoria. The subject line, "Final chance to accept reality." Isabella, I know you're hurt, but contesting the will won't work. Dad's already consulted 3 firms. Public disinheritance is legally binding when done by the estate executor, which Dad is. Tomorrow, just accept the symbolic dollar or whatever token amount grandmother left you. Don't embarrass yourself further. I forwarded it to Crawford without comment. His response was swift. Perfect. Please save all communications. My father, meanwhile, had scheduled a board meeting for that afternoon, right after the will reading. The agenda, leaked by a sympathetic secretary, restructuring ownership following estate distribution. He was so confident about receiving my grandmother's 30% stake that he'd already begun planning his expanded empire. I arrived at Crawford's firm an hour early, wearing the same black dress from the gala. Crawford met me in his office with coffee and a final review. Your grandmother's video will play automatically once I read the preliminary distributions, he explained. The moral character clause activates immediately upon verification of the triggering event. We have 53 witness statements, security footage from 3 angles, and your father's own words recorded by multiple sources. What about legal challenges? Your grandmother retained 3 separate firms to review this clause. It's been tested against every possible challenge. The language is ironclad, publicly humiliating a family member with intent to coerce forfeiture of inheritance results in automatic disqualification. Through the glass walls, I watched my father and Victoria arrive. He wore his power suit, the same one from hostile takeover meetings. Victoria clutched a new Birkin bag, already spending her anticipated millions. They entered Crawford's office like conquering heroes, ready to claim their spoils. They had no idea they were walking into a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. 6 months before her death, my grandmother had summoned me to her Westport home for what she called an important conversation. I found her in the garden, her favorite place for serious discussions, surrounded by the roses she'd cultivated for 40 years. I've been watching your father, she said without preamble. The way he treats you, the way he's teaching Victoria to treat you, it's escalating. It doesn't matter, grandmother. I don't need his approval. No, but he needs my shares. She touched a white rose, its petals perfect despite the late season. 30% of Mitchell Holdings. Without them, he loses majority control. The board could vote him out. You're not going to leave them to him? That depends entirely on his character. She turned to face me fully. Isabella, I've spent months with Crawford crafting something special. A mirror, you might say. Whatever treatment someone gives, they'll receive in return. She explained the clause then, how public humiliation would trigger forfeiture, how the assets would transfer to the wronged party, how everything had to be witnessed and documented. But why not just change the will directly? Because people deserve the chance to choose who they are. Your father can choose to be fair, to be kind, to honor family bonds over financial gain. Or, she smiled that judge's smile, he can reveal his true nature to everyone. You're testing him. I'm protecting you. There's a difference. She handed me a sealed envelope. Crawford has everything, but this is for you. Don't open it until after. It explains why I did this. 3 months later, she was gone. The envelope sat in my apartment safe, still sealed, waiting for after. After was almost here. The moment of truth is approaching. If you're wondering how a grandmother's foresight could destroy an empire built on greed, leave your prediction in the comments below. And if this story of justice resonates with you, a simple like helps others discover that standing up to family bullies is possible, with the right preparation. The moral character clause was a masterpiece of legal engineering. Crawford revealed its details to me that morning before the others arrived, showing me the documentation that would soon shatter my father's world. Your grandmother worked with 3 firms, he explained, displaying the papers. Estate law, corporate law, and contract specialists. Every word was chosen precisely. Look here. Public humiliation is defined as negative statements about a beneficiary's character, worth, or deservingness made before 20 or more witnesses. Intent to coerce includes attempting to shame someone into declining their inheritance. The documentation was overwhelming. 3 independent law firms' letters confirming the clause's validity. Recordings of my grandmother stating her intent with witnesses present. Notarized affidavits from the drafting attorneys. But this is the crucial part, Crawford pointed to a subsection. The clause is hidden in the standard will summary, completely legal under Connecticut law. Full disclosure only occurs after a triggering event. Your grandmother called it a character reveal provision. And the Mitchell Holdings shares? 30%, worth approximately $150 million at current valuation. But more importantly, they represent the controlling interest when combined with independent board members' votes. Your father needs them to remain CEO. The shares had been my grandmother's ultimate leverage, inherited from my grandfather with the explicit right to distribute them as she chose. My father had assumed they'd naturally flow to him, the sitting CEO. He'd never imagined my grandmother would weaponize them. One more thing, Crawford added. The clause includes a specific provision. Attempted legal challenges result in additional penalties. Your grandmother thought of everything. Through the glass walls, I saw more family members arriving. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Richard, several cousins. Word had spread that something significant was happening. My father noticed them too. His confident expression flickered with the first hint of uncertainty. Over the past 48 hours, I'd assembled everything with the precision my grandmother taught me. The Ritz-Carlton security footage, 3 angles, time-stamped, showing all 53 attendees. The audio recording from my phone, crystal clear, every word of my father's speech preserved. The witness list Crawford's team had compiled, including contact information and preliminary statements. But I'd gone further. 3 months of recorded family dinners where my father had systematically belittled my career. Emails between him and Victoria planning the public disinheritance. Text messages where they discussed teaching Isabella her place. You documented everything, Crawford observed, reviewing my files that morning. Grandmother told me to. 6 months ago she said start recording, not for revenge, but for protection. Truth needs evidence. The most damning piece was a video I'd taken of my father practicing his gala speech in his study. He hadn't known I was in the hallway, recording through the cracked door as he rehearsed lines like, "Isabella contributes nothing," and "She never deserved the Mitchell name." Crawford added these to the official file. Your grandmother would be proud. You've built an airtight case. I learned from the best. She always said, never go to court with feelings, go with facts. Now, sitting in that conference room as 2 o'clock approached, I watched my father check his Rolex repeatedly. Victoria scrolled through her phone, occasionally showing him something that made him nod approvingly. Property listings, probably, or yacht catalogs. The other family members settled into their seats quietly. The board members from Mitchell Holdings clustered together, whispering about regulatory implications. Crawford stood at the head of the table, a remote control in one hand and a leather folder in the other. "Shall we begin?" he asked. My father straightened his tie. Finally. Crawford's conference room felt like a tribunal. The glass walls meant everyone in the firm could witness what was about to unfold. My grandmother's final touch of transparency. 15 family members had shown up, along with 3 Mitchell Holdings board members who'd heard whispers about estate shares. Thank you all for coming, Crawford began, his voice carrying the gravity of 3 decades of practice. We're here for the formal reading of Eleanor Hayes Mitchell's last will and testament. My father sat at the center of the table like a CEO at his board meeting, Victoria to his right. I'd deliberately chosen a seat at the far end, wanting to watch their faces when the truth emerged. Before we begin, Crawford continued, I must note that Mrs. Mitchell requested this reading be video recorded for legal documentation. Are there any objections? Get on with it, my father said impatiently. Crawford activated the recording system, 3 cameras capturing every angle. Then he opened the leather folder. The preliminary distributions are as follows. To various charities, Mrs. Mitchell leaves $5 million. To household staff who served more than 10 years, individual bequests totaling $1 million. Victoria was already calculating what remained. I saw her tap 19 million into her phone calculator. To my son, Robert Mitchell, and my granddaughters, Victoria and Isabella Mitchell, I leave the remainder of my estate, including my 30% stake in Mitchell Holdings, to be distributed according to the conditions set forth in the full documentation. Finally, my father muttered. However, Crawford said, and the room stilled. Before distribution can occur, we must review the complete conditional provisions, including all qualifying clauses. He picked up the remote. Mrs. Mitchell recorded a video explanation to ensure her intentions were absolutely clear. The wall-mounted screen flickered to life, and my grandmother appeared. My grandmother appeared on the screen in stunning clarity, sitting in this very room 6 months ago. She wore her pearl necklace and the navy suit she'd favored for court appearances, every inch the former judge. "My dear family," she began, her voice strong and clear. "If you're watching this, then I am gone, and you're gathered to divide what I've left behind. But first, you must understand why I've structured my will as I have." My father shifted impatiently. Victoria had stopped scrolling through her phone. "I spent 40 years on the bench, witnessing how money corrupts family bonds. I watched children destroy each other over inheritance, saw greed transform love into litigation. I refuse to let my legacy become another cautionary tale." She paused, looking directly into the camera with those penetrating eyes that had made attorneys tremble. "Therefore, I have included in my will what I call a moral character clause. It's quite simple. Any beneficiary who publicly humiliates, demeans, or attempts to disinherit another family member forfeits all claims to my estate. This forfeiture is automatic and irreversible upon documented proof of such behavior witnessed by 20 or more individuals." The color drained from my father's face. "This clause exists because I believe inheritance should go to those who value family over fortune, who treat each other with respect regardless of career choices or lifestyle differences. Those who use public shame as a weapon against their own blood deserve nothing from me." Victoria's hand had frozen over her phone. "What is this?" "Furthermore," my grandmother continued, "any forfeited inheritance transfers immediately to the wronged party. This is not about punishment. It's about protecting those who cannot protect themselves from family members who would use wealth as a weapon." "Turn it off," my father commanded. "I'm afraid I cannot," Crawford said mildly. "Your mother's instructions were quite specific." "This is entrapment!" My father shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the floor. "She can't retroactively punish me for something that happened after her death." Crawford remained calm. "Mr. Mitchell, the clause was part of the will executed 6 months ago. You chose your actions 2 nights ago with full free will." "I didn't know about this clause." "Ignorance of the full terms doesn't invalidate them. You knew there was a will. You chose to publicly disinherit your daughter before the reading." The screen continued with my grandmother's voice. "To be perfectly clear, I had this clause reviewed by 3 independent firms. It is legally binding and bulletproof." Crawford opened a second folder. "Which brings us to the events of 2 nights ago at the Ritz-Carlton." He pulled out printed screenshots from the security footage. "Mr. Mitchell, before 53 witnesses, you stated, and I quote, 'Isabella will receive nothing from Eleanor's estate, not $1. She never deserved the Mitchell inheritance.' That was about my inheritance decisions, not Mother's. You specifically referenced Eleanor's estate, sir. We have multiple recordings." Crawford played the audio from my phone, my father's voice filling the room. "Therefore, it's been decided that Isabella will receive nothing from Eleanor's estate." The board members were whispering frantically. One was already on his phone, likely calling legal counsel. "This is ridiculous." Victoria stood now too. Isabella manipulated this somehow. How? I spoke for the first time. By letting father reveal exactly who he is? Crawford pulled out more documents. 53 witness statements confirming the public humiliation. Security footage from 3 angles. Mr. Mitchell, you have triggered the moral character clause. Your inheritance is forfeit. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. You can't do this. It's already done, Crawford said simply. Crawford methodically laid out the numbers with the precision of a surgeon. Due to the triggered moral character clause, the following transfers are now in effect. Robert Mitchell forfeits $15 million in cash and securities. These transfer to Isabella Mitchell. My father gripped the table edge, his knuckles white. Victoria Mitchell, as co-conspirator in the public humiliation, we have emails and recordings of your planning sessions, forfeits $5 million. This also transfers to Isabella. Co-conspirator? Victoria shrieked. I didn't even speak at the gala. You applauded. You participated in planning. You sent messages calling it teaching Isabella her place. All documented. Crawford turned to the final page. Most significantly, Eleanor Mitchell's 30% stake in Mitchell Holdings, valued at approximately $150 million, transfers from Robert Mitchell to Isabella Mitchell, effective immediately. The board members were on their feet. One of them, Harold Brennan, spoke first. 30%? Robert, you only hold 35% yourself. This means Isabella becomes the largest shareholder, Crawford confirmed. With 30% versus Mr. Mitchell's 35%. Combined with independent board votes, she has effective control. This is theft, my father roared. This is consequence, Crawford replied. Your mother anticipated that someone who would publicly humiliate family for money would do the same to business partners, employees, anyone they deemed lesser. She refused to let her shares enable that behavior. I stood slowly, meeting my father's furious gaze. You were right about one thing, Father. Inheritance should go to those who contribute value. But you forgot that teaching young artists to find their voice, to create beauty in this world, that has value too. More value than destroying your own daughter for sport. You planned this, Victoria accused. No, grandmother planned this. I just refused to beg for your approval. The conference room erupted into chaos. Victoria was screaming about lawsuits while typing frantically on her phone, likely Googling estate lawyers. My father had turned his fury on Crawford, threatening everything from disbarment to criminal charges. You conspired with her, he pointed at me. This whole thing was a setup. A setup requires deception, Crawford said calmly. You chose to publicly humiliate your daughter. No one forced those words from your mouth. Harold Brennan, the lead board member, was already making calls. Emergency board meeting. Tonight. Yes, all members. The ownership structure has changed. My father spun toward him. Harold, you can't seriously. Robert, you've lost your controlling interest. The board has concerns about your judgment. Publicly attacking your own daughter? What else are you capable of? She's not qualified to hold those shares. She's a teacher. She's the legal owner, Brennan replied. And frankly, after this display, I question your qualifications more than hers. Aunt Patricia, who'd been silent until now, stood up. You brought this on yourself, Robert. We all watched you torture Isabella for years over her career choice. Eleanor saw it too. You're taking her side? There are no sides. There's just consequence. Patricia turned to me. Your grandmother would be so proud. Crawford began gathering documents. Ms. Isabella Mitchell will need to schedule a meeting to discuss your new holdings. The share transfer will be filed with the SEC by end of business today. Victoria grabbed her father's arm. Do something. What would you like him to do? Crawford asked mildly. The will is ironclad. 3 firms verified it. Any legal challenge triggers additional penalties, specifically litigation costs paid from remaining personal assets. My father's phone buzzed, then again, and again. News traveled fast in their circles. As the chaos swirled around me, I pulled out the sealed envelope my grandmother had given me 6 months ago. My hands were steady as I opened it, though my heart raced. Inside was a handwritten letter in her elegant script. "My dearest Isabella," I read aloud, and the room gradually quieted. "If you're reading this, then they've shown you who they truly are, and justice has been served." Even Victoria stopped typing to listen. "I want you to know this was never about money. It was about protecting the only grandchild who loved me for myself, not my bank account. You visited me every Sunday not to secure your inheritance, but to hear my stories, share your students' artwork, and bring light into an old woman's life." My voice caught slightly, but I continued. "Your father values only what generates profit. He's forgotten that the Mitchell fortune was built by your grandfather, who started with nothing but determination and integrity. You have both those qualities, plus something more, compassion." My father sank into his chair, suddenly looking older. "I'm leaving you the power not for revenge, but for restoration. Use the shares wisely. The money? I know you'll do good with it. You always have. The foundation you've dreamed of creating for underprivileged art students? Now you can build it." I looked up at my family. "That's what I'm doing with the 20 million. Creating the Eleanor Hayes Mitchell Foundation for arts education." "You're giving it away?" Victoria gasped. "I'm investing it in future artists. The shares in Mitchell Holdings? I'll keep those to ensure the company maintains ethical practices." I met my father's eyes. "Something you forgot long ago. You can't run a company." "No, but I can vote for board members who can, starting with the motion to replace you as CEO." Within 3 hours, the emergency board meeting had convened. I attended via Crawford's conference room video link, my newly transferred shares making my presence mandatory. My father sat at the headquarters, his usual seat at the head of the table now looking more like a defendant's chair. Harold Brennan called the motion. "Given recent events demonstrating severe lack of judgment and potential liability issues, I move to remove Robert Mitchell as CEO of Mitchell Holdings." "You need cause," my father protested. "Publicly attacking a major shareholder, your own daughter, at a company-associated social event attended by investors and partners? That's cause, the damage to our reputation alone." The vote was swift, with my 30% and the independent board members combined 25%. My father's 35% couldn't save him. Victoria's 10% from her own trust was useless without voting rights until she turned 30. "Effective immediately," Brennan announced. "Robert Mitchell is removed as CEO. The board will appoint an interim CEO while we search for a permanent replacement." But the dominoes kept falling. That evening, 3 major investors pulled out of Mitchell Holdings' latest development project, citing concerns about leadership stability and corporate culture. The company's stock price dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Victoria's situation unraveled just as quickly. Without my father as CEO, her VP position became untenable. The interim CEO, brought in from outside, began a full audit of executive positions. Her lack of actual qualifications, she'd been promoted based on nepotism alone, became glaringly obvious. Within a week, she was quietly transferred to a junior analyst position. The Hermès bags and Cartier watches suddenly seemed like artifacts from another life. My father tried to leverage his remaining 35% to regain power, but found himself isolated. His reputation in Hartford's business community was destroyed. I stood to leave Crawford's conference room as my father and Victoria remained seated, seemingly unable to move. The other family members had already filed out, most avoiding eye contact with them. "This isn't over," my father said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. "Yes, it is." I paused at the door. "You spent my entire life telling me I was worthless because I chose teaching over corporate profits. You made every family gathering a trial where I had to defend my existence. That's over." "We're still family," Victoria said weakly. "Family doesn't publicly humiliate each other for entertainment. Family doesn't plan someone's disgrace over champagne and laugh about it." "So you're just walking away?" My father's question held a note of something I'd never heard before: fear. I'm establishing boundaries. My door remains open if you ever learn to respect others for who they are, not what they earn, but I won't hold my breath. Crawford interjected. Ms. Mitchell, shall I proceed with the SEC filing? Immediately. I looked back one last time. You know what grandmother told me? She said the saddest thing about you, father, wasn't your greed. It was that you had a daughter who would have loved you unconditionally, but you threw that away because she didn't fit your business plan. I walked out, my heels clicking on the marble floor with the same measured pace I'd used leaving the Ritz-Carlton. Behind me, I heard Victoria asking Crawford about appeals, about loopholes, about anything that might undo what had just happened. His response was simple. Your grandmother was a judge for 20 years. She knew how to make things permanent. The elevator doors closed on that chapter of my life. 6 months later, I stood in the gallery space that had once been an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn. Sunlight streamed through the restored windows, illuminating 50 pieces of student artwork. The Eleanor Hayes Mitchell Foundation for Arts Education had just held its first exhibition. 112 students had received full scholarships in our first round. Kids who reminded me of myself, talented, passionate, but told they were impractical dreamers. Their parents stood among the crowd, some crying as they saw their children's work professionally displayed for the first time. Ms. Mitchell? A reporter from the Hartford Courant approached. Any comment on your father's recent bankruptcy filing? I'd heard, of course. After losing the CEO position, he'd tried to start his own firm using his remaining wealth. But his reputation preceded him. No one wanted to partner with someone who'd publicly betrayed his own daughter. His 35% of Mitchell Holdings, now worth less due to the stock decline he'd triggered, wasn't enough to sustain his lifestyle. I wish him well, I said simply. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. Victoria had reached out once, 3 months ago, a tentative email asking if we could talk. I'd responded that I was willing to listen when she was ready to apologize. Genuinely, not strategically. I hadn't heard back. The 1% of shares I'd retained gave me just enough voting power to block any hostile takeovers. Mitchell Holdings, under new leadership, had pivoted towards sustainable development and community partnerships. The stock had recovered and surpassed its previous value. Aunt Patricia approached with a glass of champagne. Eleanor would have loved this. I touched the pearl necklace I wore, grandmother's, left to me separately from the contested estate. She's here, in every scholarship, every student who now believes their dreams matter. That night, after the gallery had emptied and the last student had thanked me with tears in their eyes, I stood alone in my office. On the wall hung my grandmother's portrait, the one I'd painted the night of the gala, her in judge's robes with that knowing smile. The letter she'd left me ended with words I hadn't shared with anyone. Isabella, they will call you calculating. They will say you manipulated an old woman's love. Let them. You and I know the truth, that you would have walked away from every penny if it meant having one more Sunday tea with me. That's precisely why you deserved it all. My phone buzzed. An unknown number, but I recognized the area code, my father's neighborhood. Isabella? His voice was different, smaller. I wanted you to know. I saw the exhibition coverage, the kids you're helping. I waited. Your grandmother was right. About everything. About me. About what real value looks like. A pause. I'm sorry. Not because I lost everything. Because I lost you. Because I made you feel worthless when you were the only one in the family actually creating something meaningful. Thank you for saying that. Could we? Maybe sometime. Sometime, I said. When you're ready to see me as Isabella, not as a disappointment. When you can be proud that your daughter teaches art, not in spite of it, but because of it. I'm working on it. Maybe he was. Maybe people could change when they lost everything they thought mattered and realized what actually did. Family isn't about blood or money. It's about respect, genuine love, and the courage to protect yourself from those who would diminish your light. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't wealth, it's the wisdom to know your worth and the strength to demand others see it too. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been told your dreams weren't practical, your choices weren't valuable, or your worth was measured in dollars instead of heart, please share your own experience in the comments below. We all have stories of finding our worth, despite those who tried to diminish it. Consider subscribing if you believe in justice served cold, boundaries maintained with dignity, and the power of patient wisdom. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that their value isn't determined by their bank account or someone else's approval. And remember, you are worthy, you always were. Sometimes it just takes the right moment and the right documentation for the world to see it too.